Oh, friends, we're in a fun part of the Bible. This is one of my favorite books in the Bible, my very, very favorite. And you're going to eventually groan when you hear me say that, because you're going to be, how can every book of the Bible be his favorite? But Luke is pretty special, not just because of the Christmas story, but because all it has for us. It's a story of Jesus. It's an orderly account. It's something that is shared from one friend to another to tell them the good news of Jesus Christ. So I want to kind of draw your attention to a few things as we begin it to get you thinking in terms of all that it might offer for us. The other thing I'm mindful of today is that it's a time of new beginnings and a new year. So this says up here, not every year, a new path and a new season. And I took that directly from the story of Jesus being taken by his parents up to the temple, where it said that his parents went up to the temple every year. Boy, I don't think they were expecting what happened. And sometimes when we go through the motions of doing what we've always done, sometimes God kind of sneaks up on us and finds us in a way we didn't expect, and that changes everything. And so I want to talk to you also today a little bit as we go through this, not just about a bunch of head knowledge that can impress your friends, and should you ever play Trivial Pursuit Bible Edition, you'll do very well on it. But I also want to impress upon you the importance of what does it mean to chart a new course in a new year. And so as we do that, I want to introduce you to something that I find very helpful. It's very common if you go out there and look at people who are trying to organize life or to think through what they're going to do. It talks about things we want to keep, things we want to start, and things we want to stop. It became particularly important, and where I learned about it was in the wake of the pandemic, right? What do you want to keep doing that you did before the pandemic? What do you want to stop doing that we got to stop doing in the pandemic, and now you have an excuse to stop, right? And what do you want to start doing? What was something that you realized, oh my gosh, my life would have so much more value if you, everything okay? Okay, so keep, stop, start. And so do you mind coming and finding maybe how to do that so that we can do that? And if we need to grab the laptop out of my office, we can. So we're going to do keep, stop, start. So with the keeps, yeah, this will be a lot more interesting without my notes. So let's see what I can remember, okay? So the keep, stop, start is kind of an important part. I think that all of us should be mindful as we go that in some ways the Gospel of Luke is very much about, as people of faith, as people who were God followers, what do we need to keep, what do we need to start, and what do we need to stop? As followers of Jesus versus followers of God before Jesus, what's different because of Jesus? And in fact, I would push on you to think about John the Baptist. And what we're going to find out today is he was very big on them doing certain things they knew they should. They needed to stop doing other things that they probably knew they shouldn't. And then they needed to start doing other things. Okay? And so we're going to kind of walk through that once I can kind of get my notes back here. But let me try to see if I can't give you the two quotes. Okay. Give you a couple of notes from these two quotes. And you don't have to have them in front of you. You would have just been reading on with me. The first thing would be, if you'll take your Bible and open it to Luke chapter 1. We're just going to read the first few verses in it. I don't want to really necessarily spend too much time on the parts we've already covered in Sunday morning, but I am going to share with you just a little bit right here at the beginning. We have a beginning to things, and I think I've told you all on other series to pay attention to what happens in verse 1, chapter 1. That very beginning is often something very important, and it says here in the Gospel of Luke, since many have undertaken to set down an orderly account of the events that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed on to us by those who had from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. I too decided after investigating everything carefully from the very first to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. All right? So he's trying to tell the truth about that which you've been instructed. Now, let's look at a couple of things there. So this story, Luke, if you don't know, is also part one of two books. So there's Luke and Acts. Both were written by the Apostle Luke. When they put the Bible all together, they just stuck John right there in the middle of those two, in part because the gospel is telling the story of the life of Jesus, and then you have this Acts tells the life of the early church, and so it didn't necessarily work to have both back to back. And then what I want you to see is what Luke says in these first few chapters. It'll be easier once you all can see it up here. Hey, give me just 1 second. Thank you. And then that is going to be... So that's correct, yes?
No, that's the wrong.
Okay. So what do I need
It's the other one.
All right, so...
That, go back to eShare and do start share screen.
All right.
There we go.
Can y'all see that there? Yay. All right. You don't know where the... See, I would expect... Okay, is that better? There it is. Got it. Autosave is on. We can edit. And where do I hit just the play part? Do you see it down to the bottom right? Deny. How about that? Can y'all see that? Let's give Garrett a round of applause. Yay. Excellent. And then can I hand that off to you? All right. Well, friends, okay, so what I want to draw you is first the why. Why is this book written? It very clearly says an orderly account. It's from the witnesses and servants of the word so that you may know the truth. So remember, the gospel is written so that you may know the truth. It has an intentional and purposeful reason for being written. And it's about what you've been instructed. Dear Theophilus means literally, as it says, he's the most excellent Theophilus, and Theophilus literally means friend of God. So to you, most excellent friend of God, this is written so that you might believe. Now, how many of you have been trained in the Christian faith? Anyone? Right. Hopefully all of you at some point got a little bit, and it's there. The other thing I want you to let you know is that the tradition holds it is written by Luke, and that he had special access to Mary. Now, exactly what special access, that's going to be for scholars to debate and spend a lot of time kind of parsing through. But you're going to see several stories that are only in Luke that all have to do with things that a mama would know about her boy. Okay, and I'll draw those out as we kind of approach them and come through them. But I just want you to know that that's all kind of going on in the background. So as we look at the Gospel of Luke, I also want to just be really clear. It has a pastoral intent. It is written by people who, like pastors, want people to believe and know in Jesus. And so this great quote here I also like Tom Oden. As we read early church writings, we must also always bear in mind that we are not hearing the sophisticated and detailed argument of a theologian addressing scholarly peers. This is not a paper on a chalkboard. Rather, we are eavesdropping on the intimate conversation of a bishop in his most pastoral role as he speaks to the people of God, baptized and unbaptized, about Jesus Christ and God's intention for them in his new creation. And God brings in Christ, understood how their early community needed to hear what the Bible had to say. So let me just kind of summarize that more briefly and succinctly. I am always amazed at how boring we can make the good news of Jesus Christ. That just boggles my mind. And so, friends, I want you to know, think of it not as us just like hearing some lecture about what to think about God. We're eavesdropping. Like what conversation is good enough that you would kind of listen in, right? You would want to know. What tidbit or information? Now, we're not supposed to gossip. You all know that, right? But like what would be enough that you would want to kind of lean in to hear? That's what the Bible provides. Also, my friend here, Frederick Schmidt, is an amazing professor. I got to study with him and learn from him. And he's writing specifically here about Luke. He's talking about the creative way that God takes form in Jesus Christ, and that propels people to new life and hope, and that whenever we read the Scripture, that life is somehow available to us. And so I just want you to be mindful as we read together. I want you to think about, how do you find your story in God's story? So I'm going to draw on memories you have about things that you might have experienced, and I want you to know kind of how that means something meaningful for us. And then today, as we kind of focus in a little bit more, not just on Luke in general, but on chapter 3 specifically, that we're going to look in great detail at John the Baptist, I want you to kind of have some different terms in mind. Have y'all heard these terms before? Have you heard of Herod? Okay, John the Baptist, Pontius Pilate, the Jordan River. Okay, y'all ready to answer some questions?
Sure.
No, I wasn't going to put you on a test or anything like that. But I do want to take you to these places and help introduce you to these people. There's some really cool things about each one of them. One of the things I want to kind of draw your attention to is that if you were to do like a man of the century of the first century, who would be your candidates? I think if it had been just a few years earlier, everyone would say Caesar Augustus, because he unites the whole Roman world. But some of his work was a little bit earlier than that, and so it's kind of hard to say he deserves that because it's a little bit after his time. So then if we're going to focus in on the first century, you might say, well, Herod the Great, because he helped pacify one of the most turbulent places in the world and helped make it into something wonderful. And then do you know what he built? He built the Antonia Fortress. He built the Central Palace, the Temple Mount Complex, theaters and amphitheaters, city walls, cities. He also built aqueducts. If you go with me to Israel today, when Holy Land becomes safe to journey to and pilgrimage in again, I want you to know most of what we'll see was built by Herod the Great or people in the immediately aftermath of what he did. So when you go there today, everything you see is his.
Herod the Great, constructor.
Yes, builder. But also too, meddler, swindler, and a bit of a architect too. He was able to do a lot of things that won battles because of his engineering mind. So if you're an engineer, you're going to love Herod the Great and all he did. And what he could do with water is just amazing. But anyway, that's a whole lecture for another time, and definitely something we experience. But I want you to know it's a bit of a trick question, because who is the century named after? Why is it the first century? Christ. Yeah, the birth of Jesus Christ, right? So time is actually marked on the story that we're about to say. So more important than all the buildings, more important than everything he did, more important than ruling, Jesus is remembered against Herod for what he did. Now, I want to say one other thing about Herod. I mentioned Caesar Augustus for a reason. Caesar Augustus, who was before him that was the name Caesar came from? Julius Caesar, y'all have heard of that? Beware the Ides of March, Shakespeare, if you're not a historian, a little bit there. But you have his things. So he took on a name of a leader before him, right? Right? So Herod, who you're going to hear in today's story, is not still Herod the Great. It's Herod Antipas, who is after him, okay, coming after him. But the name was so great that he kind of inherits that. But Herod the Great was known to this place, but you can in some ways read the Gospel of Luke as a comparison between Herod the Great and Jesus. That's a lens to do it through. Let's introduce you to the Jordan River. Now, we've got this map here, and then Joan brought me out this map, so people can come, feel, and touch, and look at it later. Isn't it great? And you'll notice that they left the library door open for us. If you look right in there, there's a little display on the Bible study and also the sermon series for people to check out when they go in the library. We are so blessed with a great library here, and I hope you'll do that, and I appreciate Joan helping me set up that display. But when you look at it, I hope most of you recognize this as the Holy Land. You see your Mediterranean Sea over on this side. You see kind of what would be modern-day Lebanon up here, Syria over here, the modern-day Kingdom of Jordan here. Saudi Arabia would be down here, Egypt over there, and on this, Israel, okay, would be this area here. Now, dividing it right down the middle of this picture of the Holy Land, of the area that our gospel is going to talk about, is a thing called the Jordan River. And it runs from up north at Caesarea Philippi, up there near the Golan Heights, in a little cave, a grotto where the water comes out of, and it goes all the way down into the Sea of Galilee, backs up there. The Lake Tiberias is the freshwater name for it. And then it rolls all the way down from the Sea of Galilee to way below sea level, down at the Dead Sea. Okay? And a lot of our story is going to take place, but it basically divides the region north to south. The Jordan River in the north has been backed up at a place called Yarden, where it looks like the San Antonio Riverwalk. Okay? It looks a bit like a Pentecostal Disney World. And I don't mean any insult to Pentecostals or to Disney. I just mean it looks beautiful and well orchestrated and everything very clear. And they have a place where you can rent a stall to go get in the water and get baptized. I've done it when it was really like today, where it was very cold. I wouldn't recommend that. I've also done it when it was nice, about 80 degrees, and it was perfect to get in the water. Felt really wonderful. But the reason the water is deep enough to go get in and be fully immersed is because there's a dam that holds the water back. That's not how most of the Jordan River looks, especially not down where we're told Jesus is baptized. Now here, what you'll notice is that all of the beautiful farmland there, doesn't that look like someplace in East Texas or way out even west, maybe a little bit more mountainous there in the background? You can see the mountains there over in Jordan kind of starting to rise up on the edge there. But what you'll notice about the river there is you can see it, can't you? No? Can't hardly see it. Can I point it out to you? That little drainage ditch. That's it. Most of the drainage ditches behind your neighborhood are bigger than that. The way you got across the Jordan is you stepped over it. Okay? So it is very, very, very light and small. There was agriculture on both sides the whole time. And it's not, 3 to 10 feet would be about the range it runs for most of its course. It gets even less in times of drought, more. In a lot of ways, it's a lot like a Texas river.
It's a lot like the Rio Grande.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And then when you look down here in the south, you'll notice how arid. You see there's not a lot of green. We were in the lushest time possible, but what you have instead are lots of places where they can grow dates, and those are all around, and that they're drawing the water out. But you see right in the middle of this picture also that river, and it's almost impossible to see because it's so small. So the main reason you know that you have a border now between Jordan and Israel is because there's a giant fence there or something prohibitive on both sides, and for no other reason. But I just want you to know that life exists because of the water in that river, but there's just not a whole lot there to give life, so part of it. The other part we'll talk about a little bit are some things being made straight. And I just want to show you this picture because those are a lot of a hillside where you get less than 2 inches of rain per year, which is a lot of that part of the world, especially in the basin that goes into the Jordan River down towards its southern part. And you'll see how the sides of the mountains there, do they look straight? Right? Do they look clear? So when they say make a straight path, like it's a big deal. I mean, like that's an impossibility or something difficult. They didn't have modern machinery like we do today, right? That would be no small chore going up. That is literally a road that runs up from Jericho there to Jerusalem, right? This here too, a threshing floor. I know all of y'all have threshing floors in your house, right? Out back, somewhere just past the farm where you grow your own food, right? Right. A threshing floor is a place where you brought wheat in, and you'd have to break it open to get the seed out. So what you do is you take this big sheath and all your gathering things, and you'd start hitting it down and banging it till it cracks open, and then you would take you'd bang it, see on that kind of rock board, it would all fall down, and then you would pull all the loose stuff up, and whatever was loose and not heavy enough to fall down to the ground that wasn't good seed, you would take that loose stuff and you threw it in the fire. It was just chaff. It was even better if you could do it on a windy day. Because on a windy day, what would happen is you would break it open, and then the wind would blow the chaff into a new place, and then all the seeds would be there at the bottom. Okay? The other thing I just want to draw your attention to before we jump into the text that will help you as we kind of look at it in a new way will be Pontius Pilate. So does everybody see Pilate on this here? Can you see this here? You see right here where it says Pilate?
What language is that?
That's in Latin. Latin. And that's a monument there in the Holy Land at Caesarea Maritima. And yes, I am actually that close to the recreation of it. They took the original and put it someplace where they could preserve it, but they made a cast of it that's there on display so that anybody can see. And what I want you to know about that's so cool is that is the archaeological evidence that ties Pontius Pilate to the Holy Land and says that what you're reading in Luke is historically accurate. Now, what I want to point out to you about Luke and Acts, every time people come up against something in Luke and Acts that they find to be historically challenging or not what scholars thought, they have gone back and they tend to find out that actually Luke was right and knew what he was talking about. Now, I'm not going to ask you to make that leap and say yet that everything he says spiritually then is also true, but I do want to at least establish for you that in things of historicity that can be verified and checked out, Luke Acts, more than any other book in the Bible, is on good scholarly and historical ground. I've literally been to a place where there's a road name outside of Corinth after a guy named Erastus, and everybody thought that Erastus, being one of the friends of Paul mentioned in Acts, must be a joke or a lie, because in Greek, to be Erastus means you're like a wild and crazy guy. You know, you're a womanizer and somebody who does things, wears chains, and is overly macho. And so everybody thought that there must be something off with that until they found a road from the time that was actually dedicated by Erastus. So apparently that term didn't take up that meaning until a few hundred years later. But things like that happen all the time with Luke Acts. And so I just think it's important to note, while some books I'm going to go a little more, hey, let's use a little metaphor, let's give a little openness. Luke tends to have done what he said. He made an orderly account. And if he's copying it for you, there's a reason or purpose to what he's doing. Okay. So now, are y'all ready to jump in? All right, we're going to turn to chapter 3, verse 1. I'm going to assume you've heard the Christmas story and all the excellent messages that have gotten us to today. And now we're going to take a moment and jump in. I'm going to take an extra 7 minutes because of the technical difficulties. So we cover that. And then Chidi will edit out the technical difficulty for me, right?
To the best of
To the best of his ability. So let me take you right here to Luke chapter 3, verse 1, and we'll kind of look at it together. It says, in the 15th year of the reign of Emperor Tiberius. Well, of course it was. Everybody knows who Tiberius was, right? He was the emperor, and he was also known as somebody's name we mentioned earlier, Caesar, not just for salads, okay? So named after that. And this is going to be a common thing you're going to see in Luke, both in the Gospel of Luke as well as in Acts. He'll start with who was in charge of Rome, who was in charge of the region, and then who was in charge of what's local. And so that's what he does here. He says, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea. Well, when was that? That's when that rock was put there. Didn't you see it? Didn't I show you the picture of it? Right, so we know that really was. And Herod was ruler of Galilee. Now, which Herod? What Herod? Right, that one who's also named after Herod the Great. And his brother Philip, ruler of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis, if I can say that right. Y'all know where that is, right? Right, it's just out there past Orange, make a left. Okay? No, not that. No, I'm sorry. It's just past Don Box. All right. No, Iturea and Trachonitis. Iturea is kind of, that's why I had this map over here, is this area up in here. And Trachonitis is more down towards Saudi Arabia. So one is about where Syria is. The other one is where the modern day kingdom of Jordan in northern Saudi Arabia would be. Okay. The real reason it's a little bit ambiguous toward the south is outside of just a few oases in the south. I mean, it's just all desert. There's just nobody there, so they can rule it all, but you're talking about 5 people. Okay, so it's desolate. I've been there. Okay, you keep going here, and you have Lysanias, ruler of Abilene, and during the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, now you're getting closer, the word of God came to John, son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. Now we remember Zechariah, right? He was the right person in the right place at the right time, who didn't recognize what God was doing. He got the cosmic shush. Now his son's been born, and his son has been raised to a ripe old age. And we're told that this son, John, went into all the region around the Jordan, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. It's wonderful. And he's John the Baptist. That doesn't mean he's part of a denomination, okay? Right? He's a person who baptizes people. And it says, as it is written in the book of the words of the prophet Isaiah, the voice of one crying out in the wilderness. So some people ask me where the wilderness is in Israel, and here I want you to think it's like the outback in Australia. It's everywhere. It's just outside, right? If you're in the south, it's wilderness everywhere. So like one crying out in the wilderness in a place where there are no people, in a desolation. Now wilderness. Now where else do we see a wilderness in the Bible? Well, there's several stories, but I want one in particular, so I'm just going to tell it to you. In the beginning, it says that the earth was, in the English translation, sometimes we'll say formless or void. A better translation, because the two words in Hebrew rhyme, awast, shmast. But if you look at those a little bit more closely, what you're going to find is the only other time those words, tohu vabohu, are used in the Bible to describe a place. It's a place that King David goes that is a desolation, a wilderness. Interesting. So here we're in a place that needs a creation to happen in it. And he says, prepare the way for the Lord, make his paths straight. And I showed you how difficult that would be, right, with the path? It says, every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough ways should be made smooth. Well, y'all saw the picture, right? That's a lot of work. Now, I know y'all got things that can do it. We got shovels now. We got big excavators. But even that's going to take years and years of work to get that done. And it says, and all flesh shall see the salvation of God. So what is disorder will become order. And this idea of flesh, I mean, the kind of, I just want to draw your attention, the language of Genesis 1 is all over this, okay? John said to the crowds that came out to be baptized by him, and here most translations, because the King James picks this up, it says, you brood of vipers. But here, sometimes we forget, a brood doesn't mean just a group, it means descendants of. Right, someone is a brood. The language here in the Greek is actually, you children of snakes. Right? And the reason I might want to point that out is, I don't know, does anybody remember Genesis? Right? So you people who fell for what the devil was selling. Right? I mean, that's what is being said here. Who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Now some of you, I know you're going, now, Pastor Brad, you are not sounding like a good Methodist. Where is that grace? Does anybody know what the one question anyone was asked before they could become a member of one of the societies that were started by the Wesley brothers that became Methodism? You know what the first question was? Do you have a sincere desire to flee from the wrath to come? Where did they get that from? Right? We've got to make a way. Like if you don't want to keep some things, if you don't want to stop some things, and you don't feel like you need to start some things, it's going to be very hard to follow Jesus. You see the challenge here that John the Baptist is bringing to us? There are things we need to keep doing that we've always known from our earliest thoughts are the right things to do. But there are some other things we've got to stop doing because they hurt people's souls and they act as if they aren't part of God's beloved creation, where we don't care for the other person the way we would wish to be cared for. I mean, how many of y'all have ever had a customer service situation? I had one recently. And it just got me really thinking. I've always been on one side of that conversation, and now I'm on the other side, and it's not very pleasant. So how do I remember their common humanity and be nice at them while still getting them to pick up the darn phone? Right? So it's a challenge. John said to the crowds, this is verse 7 now, John said to the crowds that came out to be baptized by him, we already said the brood of vipers, you children of the snake, bear fruits worthy of repentance in verse 8. Do not begin to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our ancestor, for I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children to Abraham. Even now the axe is lying at the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, that does not bear fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. And the crowds asked him, as would we, what then should we do? In reply, he said to them, whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none. That sounds good today. It's kind of cold out there. And whoever has food must do likewise. Even tax collectors came to be baptized. Not them, right? And they asked him, Teacher, what should we do? He said to them, collect no more than the amount prescribed for you. Uh-oh. Well, then how are we going to pay for our house and our family and all the helpers and all the stuff we've got? That won't get me a lake house. And what should we do? He said to them, talking about the soldiers this time, do not extort money from anyone by threats or false accusation and be satisfied with your wages. Now, remember, the Roman army was like the mafia. This is crazy talk. And we're told that as the people were filled with expectation and all were questioning in their hearts concerning John, whether he might be the Messiah, because this is the language and the talk, people were expecting the Messiah to come and tell them, John answered all of them by saying, I baptize you with water, but one who is more powerful than I is coming. I am not worthy to untie the thongs of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his granary, but the chaff will burn with unquenchable fire. So with many other exhortations he proclaimed the good news to the people. But Herod the ruler, who had been rebuked by him because of Herodias, his brother's wife, And because of all the evil things that Herod had done, yeah, he wasn't just sleeping with his brother's wife. There was also some other bad stuff he did. Added to them by shutting up John in prison. Because that's what we still do unto this day with people who try to correct our behavior when we know it's wrong. We get mad at them and push them out of our lives. But here, I want you to pay attention. He baptizes with fire. Some people think that's all about kind of judgment or that, or sometimes I'll hear somebody, they'll tell me, oh, well, all the good stuff happens in the in the New Testament, and then the bad God is from the New Testament. And that's for just really somebody who hasn't really read the New Testament, right? I mean, John is saying that Jesus is going to come, purify the world with fire by taking those who refuse what God is offering and let them have what they want. They will blow away like the wind. Do you have a sincere desire to flee from the wrath to come? I don't know. I hope we do. I hope we do. I just think that it reminds us that there are things we need to keep doing, things we need to stop doing, and things we need to start doing. And all of us have a beat on what those are. But as we read each week, we're going to go more deep into that. You'll be happy to know I don't have to have technical difficulty next week, so that'll go a lot quicker and smoother. I do hope you found it a little more rich or could see some of the images that I was showing you from the text by kind of giving you some background information. But I would encourage you as you start a new year to be mindful of, do you have a sincere desire to follow Jesus? And then if you do, your homework this week is write out, what do you need to keep doing? What do you need to stop doing? And what do you need to start doing? So I put that before you. Again, if you don't get it done between now and then, come talk to me about it. Still show up next week. That's optional homework, of course, but I want to thank everyone for being here. And that was closer to 44, so I'll even pare it down just a touch more for next week. But I didn't want to not give an introduction to what the purpose is. Again, I believe the gospel is pastoral, and I believe the gospel is intentional. So some people want it to be a book about things it's not. It is an orderly account. It is a historically disciplined, orderly account, but it isn't history. It's not written to be a book about cosmology or theology. It's a book that's meant to help people get closer to Jesus. So I just want to share that. I'll take other questions too. I just kind of gave the first one. I know some people have to go if you were on a short timeline. Thank you for being here. But for those others, I will stay and answer questions. And I've got a hard stop at 1. No questions. I explained it perfectly. Everyone understands. Anybody feel like it's a little judgy?
I got a comment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I want comments, Patsy.
Well, yesterday, I participated last year in
Yeah.
doing an oral history of my life.
Mm.
And I'm almost a century old, 90-something years.
Uh-huh.
And it's very hard to remember the precise
Sure.
date, the precise time. And going back over this, I found where I made a few errors in my oral
Right.
exposition that I gave, that I had tried to prepare for.
Yeah.
So, if you look at Luke and think about it in those terms,
Yeah.
it's remarkable how well organized it is.
Right.
And I thought I had done a pretty good job, and I did mine, frankly. A little bitty critique.
Oh.
It's hard to reflect over a long period of time.
So for people watching, let me repeat that, Patsy, because I want to make sure, because we don't have a mic on you, and so I want to make sure they can hear. But what a great comment. So Patsy was describing her doing her own kind of oral history, as well as trying to reflect on her life to capture that in a way that was great. And she mentioned the challenge in that there are always a few dates and times that it's quite something to try to go through. So to have it as quite an orderly account as we do, given that people are prone to those kind of things are there. I would agree with that 100%. There are going to be some parts in Acts that are going to make you pull your hair out. So like we'll get some things where like literally a page of Acts all happened in like one day. And then we're going to get other parts of Acts that like 1 decade got a sentence. And it's like, oh my gosh, where's the rest of this? Tell me all the stuff. I want to know, you know. And so it has that element to it. I think what's cool though is with Luke being someone who's gathering the information together, it's very telling. I mean, something we often forget when we read our Bibles, something like Mark as an example, comes out of an oral tradition where people were telling the story of Jesus on a caravan trail. They were going between places, and every night at the fire, they would say, oh, tell us again what happened with Jesus. And somebody would say it, and they would tell you the whole story, or they would tell parts, and they would tell a little bit more each of their journey. And what happened is these firsthand accounts and reports, he kind of says it there, if you go back and read those first few verses, right? These people are now getting old, and you have to like capture the stories. And so that's what Luke says he's all about, that these people who first knew Jesus and what happened, now he's gathering them together and write them all out. What we know about oral tradition in general is that relatively, especially a story that's retold multiple times, is pretty reliable. Let me just show you a demonstration of that, right? So we have a story. Have y'all heard it? It's called The Three Little Pigs, right? And so he goes to the first house, and it was built of what? Straw. And what did he do? He huffed and puffed and blew the house down, right? He goes to the second house, right? And it was built of what? Sticks, wood, right? And he did what? Huffed and puffed and blew the house down. He went to the third house, right? And it was built of what? Brick. And what happened? He huffed and he puffed and he blew it down, because this is my story. I can tell it how I want, right? Well, every 3-year-old is going to stop you. Everybody around the fire, everyone in the family group, they're going to stop you. Now, we live in a time where literature is amongst strangers. It's not storytelling. That's not the time that the Bible was written in. Okay, in the Bible, everybody knew. I mean, the people writing it, capturing it, they knew each other. It wasn't built on a German chalkboard. Okay, a lot of our theology is, though. And so we have to rethink of it. It's part of what I'm saying. It's like there were people who were experiencing God and were so moved by what God did in the world and in their lives that they were like, did you see that? Can you believe what God did? And what happens is when we write it down, we capture it, and we study it, it's like, oh yeah, another miracle. I mean, really? These are people whose lives were transformed. So I don't mind doing some historicity. Also, too, I put the pictures there in case you ever want to go with me. I want y'all to come on the trip with me, and I can show y'all around all these amazing sites. But I do want to just kind of push you to reimagine the text in a way that is full of the miraculous, life-giving power it has, because that's how it was written and why it was written.
If you're interested in reading the Bible again through a year, YouVersion has a study right now that's chronological.
Sure.
In the Bible. So that might help you put it in. But there's also a chronological Bible.
Right. So there are different things that can help you walk through some timing, but I don't want you to do that right now. I want you to read Luke with me and go deep. I feel like we got the breadth. Many of us, I don't want to just race through it again. I want to go deep into it. Yeah.
What do you think about the YouVersion's New English translation?
I don't know it, so I don't think about it.
I love that. And
That's
it has
awesome.
Study notes.
I'm all for it. There's, like I said, the only version I care about is the one that gets you reading it. So I love people reading it. But I also want, I'm going to say this too. Here, I'm going to risk something. Y'all ready? Candy's over there. She's my SPR chair. So if you need to go report to her. Today, the problem is not that we don't have a lot of people reading the Bible. We have fewer people actually thinking through what it actually might mean in their life or why it matters. And to me, that's kind of the challenge. And so I don't mind a rushing through the story and a kind of knowledge of it and kind of getting things, but I think there is a deeper need to really look and feel the fault in our analogies, where often we try to say, oh, well, it's just like it was back then. Well, really, it's not. Everything's completely different. I mean, look at what I'm holding. Look at what I just did. They would have been terrified that I just did some sort of magic show to be able to put this on there. Without, I mean, they would never, how many of y'all had a notepad you were writing on? The fact that the edges of your paper, I said torn paper in there for a reason. There's a thing called Future Shock, an essay and book that was written by a guy about the future. And he said the thing that people would, from the ancient times, would be mind-boggled by would be the straight edges on our paper. Because that's only a recent invention. I actually did a funeral for a guy who remembered when sliced bread came to town. So, I mean, I'm just saying it's a different time. So if we want to understand what the Bible means, we need to kind of enter their world. We need to walk with sand in our shoes. Oh, hold on. Did they wear shoes? They didn't wear shoes. What did they have? Kind of weird sandals if they could afford them. Yeah. A lot of people scuffed their feet so they would be able to work in the field without anything on them. Yeah, thanks.
Are the same words for wilderness used when Jesus' spiritual journey includes 40 days in the wilderness?
Yes. Let me repeat the question for the people online in case we have anybody left. Are the same word for wilderness used here and also in the spiritual journey on Jesus? Absolutely yes, and we get to that near. We got to go get him baptized first.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Because, I mean, that's our spiritual journey.
Oh, yeah. That's our spiritual journey too. And there's a great wilderness thing. And what also too, again, how to say, all of them are Greek words describing Aramaic that was first Hebrew. So it's a bit of I don't want to pretend there's no transliteration in the illustrations. The kind of the pointing back to Genesis. But I think Luke is doing that kind of methodically and intentionally to get us to have, because he's trying to build up to the story of Abraham, and he wants it made clear. It's not, and please understand here, I'm not saying John the Baptist never said what Luke puts in his mouth, but there's no doubt that the way Luke has told the story is to highlight what's being said for a theological purpose. Because there were many people in the time of Luke who thought that because of the faith of a forefather, specifically Abraham, that what they do didn't matter. None of us would ever do that, right? We would never believe that our mom or dad's faith or the faith of someone who went before who was a good Methodist means that we're somehow good, right? We all know it's on us to have faith, right? Just throwing that out there. Sorry. I just have to. What else? Those aren't the only questions. Those are great questions. What other questions? There's a lot here. Do you know how hard it was not to try to tell you the whole story all the way from the first to that? Oh my gosh. I had to jump over all that. There were some parts I didn't get to talk about that I'm desperate to talk about because I think I don't see them the way other people see them. Yeah, go ahead, Patsy.
The more Bible study that I do, the more I realize and understand how someone could decide to spend their life studying book number, chapter number, verse number, and spend their life studying that.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, to get us to thinking like that is what you're trying to do.
Sure, absolutely. So Patsy said the more she studies the Bible, the more she comes to realize why somebody would spend their whole life studying verse number, chapter number, section number, and go deeper into it. I totally agree. I was so blessed to learn from Dr. Joette Basler, and I'll bring her name up from time to time. She taught me a lot about the New Testament. I don't bring that up because her and I agreed on much, because I was the one always asking the questions that kind of got her a little upset, and I'd have to go to office hours to find out more and to dig deeper. But she was so brilliant at getting me to read more things about what I agreed with, but also what I didn't agree with, to kind of challenge me to go further. She was such a great professor. I'm so deeply indebted to her as a human being, also a deep person of faith, great preacher too, and she blessed me so much. But she said this about how she was working on, she had developed a type of radio telescope that could look at the distance of the galaxy and certain stars And she was all into that, and she loved it. And she left that to study the Bible because the universe was too small compared to Scripture. Yeah, I thought that was...
That's a great comment.
That was a great comment. I never forgot it. I mean, I hate to say there are a few things from her class I forgot, but I didn't forget that. That one stuck with me. But it's just there's so much. It's such a different. It's a whole. How to say? People are searching online right now to find these kind of simulations and virtual worlds and stuff like that. But what you get when you go into the Bible is this world from a very different perspective. And there's a hope that if we can experience something with someone else from a different perspective, maybe there's something true behind it. Paul Tillich, here I'll drop a little theology on you just because, well, I've got a doctorate in it, but I'm just going to put it out there. Paul Tillich wrote a book called My Search for Absolutes. And it culminates in a beautiful line where he says, even adrift on the sea of relativity will need some stars, fixed points by which to navigate. And what happens when we go into the text in the Bible and someone takes the time to methodically write down a historical kind of robust, let's call it historically robust account of the story of Jesus, it's so that we might know that the experience we've had in our life lines up with someone else's experience in a way that truth matters. And so it's not a small claim Luke is writing when he says, I write this down so you may know the truth. It's a big deal. Also, too, at God's University, at the University of Texas, they're on the main building. What does it say across the inner part? Most people don't know this, but it says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Who's being quoted there? Jesus. Jesus says that. It's beautiful. But that's what every one of these Bibles is written to do. That's what the gospel is there for. So, I'm sorry, that's probably too much of my theological underwear. All right. What other questions? Those are great questions. I'll start dancing by myself if you don't give me something to dance with. All right. Well, friends, we'll start, about the same time right there at 12:05, so noon plus 5 minutes, so that people have time to visit, get settled. Also, too, we'll make sure the coffee maker is running earlier, so that those that were waiting for a coffee because they got here early have that. I just want to let you know, though, anytime you see me standing here and I'm able to say anything, it's because lots of people did a wonderful work. So just would y'all show your appreciation to Facilities and Light and Sound for all the great work they did? Because this doesn't come off without their help in the library department. But everyone has done a great job for this. So thank you all so much, friends. I will stay and answer questions you didn't want to ask by sitting at the table. But y'all are going to have to work on the questions. So read ahead a little bit. We're going to go further into chapter 3 next week. We'll probably get to the end of it next week. But make sure you just write the question that just burns in your craw. You're like that, or if you're mad at me for saying that you need a desire to flee from there, I'll break all that down later. So please know I'm a grace-based person. So I'll show you what I'm saying, but I want to leave you in that tension, and I hope you'll start something this week. Thanks.